Hello. In the fifth round of the St. Louis Rapid tournament, Grandmaster Sam Shankland bet Grandmaster Mamadero with the black pieces with a crushing attack. In this video, we are going to take a look at that game, and in the description, I have also added a link to a Lichess study that I have created, which has the light-hearted annotations of these games with some little bit of comments and some really nice interesting variations. So make sure you check that out as well after this video. So let's check out this game from which we can learn something, and the most important thing that we are going to learn from this game is how despite being despite having the black pieces, Grandmaster Sam Shankland slowly gained space on the king side and went for a very crushing blow that completely exposed White's king. So let's check out this game. The game started with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight c3, and here black has a lot of options. As we know, black can play d into c4, which is one of my favorite openings, the Vienna defense. Black can play bishop b4, which is the Ragozin, but Grandmaster Sam Shankland went for the move c6, which transposes to the Semislav defense. Now again, white has a lot of ways to complicate things, to enter some really complicated variations like bishop g5, which leads to one of the most complicated variations in chess opening theory, d into c4, e4, b5, and then e5. But in this game, Mamadero kept it simple. He played e3, which is of course one of the main lines. Black played knight d7, white played queen c2, and black developed his bishop to d6. Here white played b3. Now b3 is a move which gives white a positional approach in the opening against the Slav defense. White is not trying to complicate things and snatch the initiative right from the start with this variation, but he wants to place his pieces on optimal squares and then slowly try to break in the center with e4 and hopefully snatch the initiative. So white plays b3. The idea is very clear that he would like to play bishop b2, fianchet to the bishop on b2, and the other idea behind the move b3 is that whenever white develops his bishop to either to e2 or d3, he doesn't want black to exchange on c4 and force white to waste another move in recapturing the pawn with the bishop. So white first plays b3. This also helps him develop the bishop on the next move either to e2 or d3 without worrying about d into c4. So after b3, black goes short castles. White plays bishop e2. Black plays b6. Black would also love to fianchet to his bishop to b7. That's the only minor piece which is not yet developed for black. So black goes on to develop his bishop on c8. Apart from b6, there's also the move e5, which leads to a little bit of dry position. Black accepts an isolated queen pawn after c into d5, c into d5, knight b5, bishop b4 check, bishop d2, bishop into d2, knight into d2, and after a6, d into e5, knight e5, knight d4, we enter an isolated queen pawn position. This is one of the main lines against the b3 variation which white chose in this game, and this position is usually agreed upon as an equality, but of course there is still some play, and white tries to play against black's isolated queen pawn on d5. So this is one of the safe lines for black, trying to achieve equality by force straight out of the opening. But in the game, after bishop e2, black played b6. White goes for short castle. Black develops his bishop to b7, and white plays bishop b2. So we can see that both sides have completed their development. They have castled, and now it's time to take action in the center, initiate action in the center. The main pawn break for white is to play e4, which helps him gain some space in the center, and the main pawn break for black is to play c5, which challenges white's center and opens up the bishop on b7. Here black continued with the move queen e7, placing the queen on a nice square and also connecting both the rooks on a8 and f8. The other idea of playing queen e7 is to play bishop a3 and exchange the bishop on b2, because this bishop can prove to be quite strong for white, especially when black plays c5 and white captures with d into c5. The bishop opens up and exerts a strong pressure along the a1 h8 diagonal. So it makes sense for black to go for bishop a3 and exchange the dark square bishop. So queen e7 has one of these ideas, and I believe that's the reason why Grandmaster Mamediaro played the move rook a d1, not only bringing his rook on one of the central files where it can be useful in the future, but also vacating the a1 square for the bishop. So in case black plays bishop a3, white always has the option of retreating the bishop on the a1 square. Black brings his rook on the d file as well with rook a d1. White goes e4, finally breaking in the center, but usually black is well prepared for this pawn break. And another thing to note is that if white gets a chance, he would play e5, forking our bishop and the knight on f6 and the bishop on d6. So usually e4 is made by exchanging on the e4 square with d into e4, knight e4, queen e4, and now, as I already mentioned, one of black's main ideas is to break with c5, which challenges white's center as well as opens up the bishop on b7. But we can't play c5 straight away because our bishop on b7 is hanging, it's unprotected, and that's the reason why black plays the move f5, hitting the queen on e4, forcing it to move away from the e4 square so that we can play c5 on the next move. The move f5, it's pretty obvious that it weakens the pawn on e6, and the pawn on e6 turns out into a backward pawn, which can be a huge potential weakness for black. But as we will see in the game, black is going to break with c5 straight away, eliminating this pawn on d4, which gives the pawn on e6 a chance to advance further with e5 and e4. So this, even though the pawn on e6 becomes a weakness, it's not a permanent weakness. It's a temporary weakness which black is about to solve pretty soon. So after f5, white plays queen e3 and black breaks in the center with c5, opening up the bishop on b7, and the bishop exerts some pressure along that diagonal, along the a8 h1 diagonal. White brings his rook on e1, aiming to target the e6 pawn in the future, but as we will see, white doesn't get that chance to put pressure on the e6 pawn. Apart from rook e1, if white decides to play d5, then we can just play e5 and we have a nice space in the center thanks to the pawns on e5 and f5. The pawn on d5, even though it's a protected pass pawn, it's comfortably blocked by the bishop on d6. So here black is doing quite good, and slowly black can even try to expand on the king side quickly, with not slowly but quickly, with e4 and f4. So white has to watch out for it, and I believe this position is slightly better for black. So white settled down on the move rook f1, bringing his rook in the game. Black immediately exchanged the pawns on d4, knight into d4, and went for the pawn advance with e5. So as I mentioned earlier, the pawn on e6, even though that was a backward pawn, it was temporary, and black immediately rectifies it. And we can see that because of the pawns on e5 and f5, black has a very nice space advantage on the king side. Our bishop on b7 is already pointed towards white's king side, so we can see that black's pieces has huge potential to create something, some sort of initiative, some sort of an attack against the white king. So after e5, the knight on d4 is under attack, and it seems very logical to move the knight from d4 to a square like b5, which is what Mamediaro did in the game. But in fact, it's a huge mistake because it allows black to snatch the initiative straight away by force. So instead of knight b5, the correct move was bishop d3, maintaining the knight on d4 for the moment. And by playing bishop d3, white also threatens the pawn on f5. Black can continue with a simple move like e4, bishop c2. c5 is an interesting move as well, but a simple move like bishop c2, and black can play bishop c5, and it's a completely fine position for both sides. Mm, the position is quite unclear because black has space on the king side and white will try to create some counter attack on the queen side. So all in all, it's a good playable position for both the sides. So bishop d3 was a good move. In fact, in the Leach's study that I have created and given the link in the description, I have added a few other variations as well. So make sure you check that out, and you will get more idea what is exactly happening in the position and some interesting ideas, some interesting tactical ideas as well. So for example, the move c5, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the best moves for white in this position, which gives white a lot of counter-attacking chances. So bishop d3 was the best move for white in hopes to create counter-attack, but the most logical move, knight b5, is a big mistake because black plays bishop c5. First of all, improving the bishop's position to c5, from where it always eyes the pawn on f2, which is some sort of a weakness, as we will soon see. Also, the bishop on d6 was under attack, so black simply moves the bishop away with a tempo. The queen on e3 is under attack, so white plays it to g3, but black hits it further with f4. White plays queen h3, and now black brings his knight in the battle with knight f6. One of the ideas is to play knight e4, from where we can target the pawn on f2. White plays knight c3, covering the e4 square, making sure that black's knight is not going to jump on e4. And here black unleashed a very powerful move, a very powerful sacrifice. If you want, you can pause the video and think for a while. I think maximum 5 minutes would be more than sufficient in this position. And then you can come back, you can start the video, and you can see the further game. So here, after knight c3, the correct move for black is to play bishop into f2, sacrificing the bishop with the sole idea of exposing white's king. We can see that only the queen on h3 is in fact the only piece for black that is helping him in establishing some sort of defense, but there's no minor piece on the king side, especially the knight on f3 is completely missing, and that states that white has a very less number of pieces on the king side, and that's exactly what black is set out to exploit with this beautiful bishop sacrifice. After bishop f2 check, white has no other move but to take the bishop on f2 with king into f2, and black plays bishop c8. Now this is the key move, this is the main point of the bishop sacrifice, and we very rarely see that a sacrifice is followed by such a cool bishop retreat, right? So bishop c8, a beautiful move, attacking the queen on h3, and black perfectly realized that the bishop is going to be more useful along this diagonal because it is going to help moves like knight g4 rather than having the bishop on the b7 g2 diagonal. So that's the reason why black retreated the bishop to c8, and we can see that the queen on h3 doesn't have a comfortable square to land on. White started by first exchanging the rooks on d8, but it doesn't make a difference. Black recaptures with the rook, and now white has a few options. If white plays queen h4, black can play knight e4 check or knight g4 check, and we can easily see that, for example, if knight e4 check, knight e4, queen h4 check, black wins the queen on h4. If white plays queen f3 in this position, then black can play knight g4 check once again, and that's the reason why it's useful to have the bishop on c8 covering the knight on g4. The knight on g4 gives a check, so white has to move the king to g1. Of course, king f1 is made by knight h2 check, forking the king and the queen, so black wins the queen on the spot. And if white goes king h1, black plays queen h4, the queen joins the party. Queen h2 and queen e1 are the double threats which simply spells the end for white in this position. So after queen h4, black is having a winning attack. So instead of moving the queen away from h3, white chose to block the attack with g4, but it doesn't make a difference because white brings another piece with a decisive effect. This time the rook joins the attack on the second rank and creating threats like rook into b2. The rook also pins the bishop on e2, which allows ideas like knight g4 check or bishop into g4. After rook d2, white tried rook d1, and after bishop into g4, simply collecting the g4 pawn. White cannot capture the bishop because it's pinned along the second rank. And yeah, after bishop g4, there are just too many threats for white to handle, and white simply resigned. So this was a beautiful crushing attack by Grandmaster Sam Shankland that I personally liked a lot, especially this move after knight c3. Black sacrificed the bishop and then followed it up with a really cool bishop retreat with bishop c8, and there was simply no defense for for white in this position. So I hope you enjoyed this game, and stay tuned for more instructive videos. I'm going to make sure that I will be giving the Lichess study with some light annotations, light-hearted comments, and some interesting variations for you to enjoy the game apart from this video as well. Okay guys, see you, take care till the next video. Bye bye.